It was supposed to be another quiet weekend at the cabin. Just me and Eric, my closest friend for nearly 20 years. We'd done this kind of thing before. Escaping the noise, the city, the pressure of being around people who never quite got us. Up here, nestled among the pine trees by the lake, we could just be. I arrived first, letting the screen door thwack shut behind me as I tossed my duffel onto the old couch. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon light. The place smelled like cedar, smoke, and summer memories. Eric would be here any minute. I cracked a beer and stood on the porch, watching the sun slide lower, brushing the lake with fire. When Eric finally showed up, his hair was a little longer than usual, some gray threading through the dark. Still handsome. Still that half grin that said he saw more than he ever admitted. He hugged me like he always did, tight, solid, no awkwardness. But this time, I felt something shift. Maybe in me. Maybe in him. I didn't know yet. That night, after grilling steaks and half a bottle of bourbon, we sat out back listening to frogs and talking about the stupidest things, like what kind of men we'd have married if we'd been braver in our 20s. It wasn't the first time the conversation had skirted the edge of what if, but this time it lingered. Longer silences. Eyes meeting too long. Then darting away. You ever think about us? I asked suddenly, my voice quieter than it needed to be. Eric looked at me. Not surprised. Not confused. Just quiet. Thoughtful. Yeah, he said after a beat. Sometimes. We didn't talk about it again that night. Just let the silence stretch like a blanket between us. Comfortable. A little heavy. The next morning I got up early. The cabin was quiet. Eric was still in bed, or so I thought. I grabbed clean clothes and walked into the living room to change. Shirt off, jeans half down, when I noticed him standing in the hallway. Watching me. He wasn't pretending not to. He didn't flinch or apologize. Just stood there, eyes soft, lips parted. And me? I didn't stop. Our eyes locked. I let my jeans slide the rest of the way off. I didn't speak. I didn't laugh. And he didn't move. It was the most electric moment of my life, and it was dead silent. I could feel the air shift between us. My chest rose with every breath, aware of his eyes on me. And still, I didn't stop. There was no embarrassment. No shame. Only something raw. Honest. Unspoken but heavy as gravity. And in that second, I knew this weekend wouldn't be like any other we'd had before. He didn't say a word. Eric just stood there in the doorway, one hand resting on the old wood frame, eyes never leaving my body. Not in a predatory way. Not even in a way that made me feel nervous. It was something softer than that. Almost reverent. Like he was seeing me for the first time, not just my skin, but the years we'd shared, the versions of ourselves we'd been around each other. I felt seen in a way I hadn't expected at 48. I pulled on my t-shirt slowly, my fingers brushing against my own chest as I dragged the cotton down, my skin still warm from the morning sun filtering through the windows. My jeans stayed on the floor. You're up early, I finally said, breaking the moment, but my voice came out rough, lower than usual. Eric stepped inside the room. Just a few feet, but it felt closer than we'd ever stood outside of a hug. He nodded toward the kitchen without taking his eyes off me. Smelled the coffee. Thought you'd be out back. I was about to be. He crossed the room, slow and deliberate, and picked up the mug I'd already poured for him. Our hands almost touched when he reached for it, and I swear my skin burned from the almost contact. Still, no one said anything. There was this unspoken agreement forming between us. Don't name it, don't ruin it. Just feel it. We sat on the back porch, just like always, but everything had changed. The silence wasn't the same. It buzzed. My leg brushed us once, and neither of us pulled away. I felt hyper-aware of every breath he took. Of how the breeze lifted the hem of his t-shirt. Of the way his fingers curled around his coffee mug like he needed grounding. Last night, I said, finally. You said you think about us. What does that mean? He didn't look at me right away. He stared out at the water. Means sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd kissed you that night after your divorce. When we were drunk on your rooftop. I blinked. That was 17 years ago. You remember that? I remember everything about it. His voice was steady, but something in it trembled, like a string pulled too tight. You were crying. I didn't want to take advantage. But you looked at me like you wanted something I didn't think I was allowed to give. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. I wanted you to. He finally turned to me. His eyes were red around the edges, like he was holding something in. Maybe anger at himself. Maybe sadness. Maybe everything he'd never said. And maybe I'd had enough of things unsaid. I set down my mug, stood up, and walked inside. I didn't tell him to follow. I didn't have to. I went into the guest bedroom, his room, and sat on the edge of the bed. When he walked in a few seconds later, I looked at him, still shirtless, and said, "You looked at me this morning like you've been wanting to for years. Why now?" Eric stepped in and closed the door behind him. "Because for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of what happens after." That did something to me. It melted the edges of the wall I'd built over years of pretending we were just friends. I stood up slowly and we stood face to face. The light coming through the blinds carved lines across his face, time, age, and all the life we'd already lived apart. I reached out and touched his arm. He didn't flinch. His eyes closed. "You've been with men since your divorce," he said. "I haven't." "I know. I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing." "You don't have to know. You just have to want it." He looked at me for a long moment. "I do." Then I stepped closer until our foreheads nearly touched. He reached out and let his fingers run lightly down my side, the roughness of his calluses dragging against my skin. My breath caught in my throat. I let my hands settle on his waist. We stood like that, just breathing, until he leaned forward and kissed me. It was hesitant at first, shaky, but when I kissed him back, he made this small sound in the back of his throat, like relief. "Hey, thanks for watching until this point. Please leave a comment if you're enjoying the video. It really helps us grow the channel and reach more people. And hey, thank you very much. Let's get back to story." We were older, slower, but nothing about the way his hands moved across my back felt unsure. It felt like coming home, like something that had been waiting decades to finally happen. We didn't rush. We didn't undress. We didn't talk. We just stood there in that room, holding each other, kissing, the years falling away with every second. And for the first time since I met Eric, I wasn't just his friend. I was something more. The rest of that morning felt like a dream stretched thin across reality. We didn't talk much, just moved around each other in the small kitchen, sharing quiet looks, brushing shoulders, pretending to busy ourselves with scrambled eggs and toast. But everything had changed. We both knew it. I'd catch Eric watching me, his eyes lingering longer now, softer, more open. Not in a lustful way, but in that slow, deliberate way a man looks when he's trying to memorize something. Like he wasn't sure this would last, and he wanted to burn every detail into memory. After breakfast, we sat out by the lake. I could feel the weight of what had happened between us pressing at my chest. Not in a bad way. In a way that reminded me I was alive. That something in me had cracked open, finally. Eric skipped a rock across the water and said, almost too quietly, "Do you regret it?" I looked at him, then down at my hands. "No, not even a little." He nodded, but didn't meet my eyes. "It's just, I've thought about you like that for years." Then I talked myself out of it. Tell myself I was just lonely, or confused, or projecting. And now I know I wasn't imagining it. But it scares the hell out of me. I reached over and rested my hand on his knee. The contact sent a quiet tremor through his body. I didn't squeeze, just held it there, warm and steady. "It scares me too," I admitted. "But it also feels like the only honest thing I've done in years." That night, something shifted again. Not in a rush of passion, but in comfort. We sat on the couch together after a long walk through the woods, our arms occasionally brushing as we passed the bottle of red wine between us. The air smelled like pine and firewood. We'd gotten caught in a light rain, our shirts damp against our backs, our hair still wet. He looked at me as the light from the fireplace danced across his face. "You ever feel like you spent most of your life playing it safe?" I nodded. I thought being careful would protect me, but all it did was keep me lonely. His eyes flickered. "Yeah." I turned to him, heart knocking harder now. "You don't have to be lonely tonight." He didn't speak. He just reached for me. This time, it wasn't a kiss sparked by years of silence. It was something quieter, more intentional. His lips were warmer, more confident. His hands found my sides like he already knew them. When his fingers slid beneath the hem of my shirt, I raised my arms to let him pull it over my head. We took our time. He explored me like a man rediscovering his own hunger. His touch was reverent, light across my chest, slower across my stomach. My hands roamed his shoulders, down the ridge of his spine, and I felt the shiver ripple through him. "Is this okay?" he whispered against my neck. "It's perfect." We moved to the bedroom. No urgency, just presence. He undressed me piece by piece, pausing often to kiss the skin he revealed, my collarbone, my ribs, the crease of my hip. I did the same, mapping him like territory I had never dared claim until now. There was no performance between us. No pressure. Just two men, grown and real, letting go of decades of should-haves and finally stepping into something honest. We didn't need words. Just breath. Just hands. Just skin and closeness. We made love slowly, and I say made love because that's what it was. Not some lustful escape, not a long-repressed fantasy finally realized, but a deep, tender claiming. A knowing. A choosing. Later, we lay tangled together, our bodies warm under the old quilt. His head rested on my chest, his fingers drawing soft lines along my side. "I never thought I'd do this," he murmured. "Me neither. But I'm glad we did." I kissed the top of his head. "Me too." We drifted into sleep like that, no walls, no pretending, no labels. Just men who'd lived enough life to know how rare this kind of moment really is, and how important it is to hold onto it with everything you've got. The morning light poured through the thin curtains like a quiet confession. I woke before Eric, his arm still slung over my waist, his breath warm against the back of my neck. I stayed still, not wanting to break the spell of it. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up feeling empty. I felt grounded, like something had clicked into place without me even knowing it was missing. Eventually, he stirred. His hand flexed on my stomach, then settled again. I turned my head slightly. "You awake?" A sleepy groan, then, "Yeah. I think so." We stayed there in silence for a while, our bodies close, the weight of last night heavy in the best way. I expected him to pull away, to retreat, but he didn't. Instead, he nuzzled closer like he belonged there. "You good?" I asked, careful with the question. Eric nodded against my shoulder. "Yeah. Just adjusting." We both chuckled softly. It wasn't awkward. Just new. Eventually, we got up and dressed. I watched him put on his jeans, his movements slower, more thoughtful than usual. He caught me watching and smiled, that same half-grin from the first day we met, but now it meant something different. It wasn't a mask anymore. It was vulnerable. Honest. We spent the day walking around the lake, cooking lunch together, laughing like we always had. But now, in between those normal things, there were touches. Quiet glances. The kind of intimacy that blooms not from passion alone, but from years of knowing someone's soul. That night, we sat in the old rocking chairs on the porch, the stars above us like shattered glass. Eric held a beer in one hand, his other resting on my thigh. He hadn't done that before, not in public, not even out here. But he did now, like he didn't care anymore who saw. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about what happens when we go back." I didn't answer right away. "Me too. I don't want this to be some cabin fantasy. Some once and done." My chest tightened. I turned to him. "It doesn't have to be. I know. But the world out there isn't as easy as it is here." "No. But I'm not going back to pretending. Not after this." Eric looked at me then, really looked. And something in his expression shifted. A softness. A resolve. "I've always admired how you could live out," he said. "Even when I was too scared to. You weren't ready. That's okay. I think I am now." We leaned into each other then, his lips brushing mine with a kind of relief that carried years in its wake. The kiss was slower this time. More certain. His hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me in gently. I let mine slide beneath his shirt, feeling the curve of his lower back, the familiar heat of his skin. We didn't go to bed to sleep right away. We lay on top of the covers, kissing, exploring each other all over again. It was different from the night before, less hesitation, more laughter between kisses, more whispers in the dark. I ran my fingers along the scar on his shoulder from a hiking trip years ago. He smiled. "Still remember how I fell? You were showing off. Tripped over your own ego." He grinned and pulled me closer. "And you carried me back half a mile like a goddamn action hero." I kissed him again, lips to the side of his throat. "You've been heavy ever since." "Hey, not complaining." His laugh rumbled against my chest, then faded into something more tender. "You're good to me," he whispered. I brushed his hair back. "You've always been good to me. You just didn't know how to show it." He looked up at me, eyes glassy. "I'm learning." That night, as we lay tangled again in the quiet hum of the forest, I realized something. Love doesn't always come in grand declarations or fireworks. Sometimes it builds slowly, quiet as a creek through the woods, until one day it becomes the only thing that feels real. And Eric? He wasn't just my best friend anymore. He was the man I'd waited my whole life to stop waiting for. We left the cabin on a Monday morning draped in fog. Everything felt quieter than it had going in, like the trees themselves knew something had shifted. Eric drove while I rode shotgun, his playlist humming through the truck like a heartbeat beneath our silence. There was no dramatic goodbye to the place. Just bags in the back seat, the screen door left ajar, and a shared glance in the rearview mirror. But between us, everything was different. I watched him as he drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the center console close enough to brush my leg now and then. Every time he did, my heart pulled toward him like gravity. I don't know what surprised me more, how naturally we had fallen into this new rhythm, or how much it terrified me. "You okay?" I asked after about an hour of driving. Eric nodded. "Yeah, just thinking. About?" He glanced at me, then back to the road. "You. Us. What this looks like when we're not in a bubble with pine trees and no cell reception." I didn't answer right away. It was a fair question. "I think it looks like whatever we decide it is," I said finally. "No one's waiting to label us. We're not 21. We don't owe anyone anything. But I still feel like I have to explain it. To myself. I've never had a boyfriend." I smiled. "Neither have I." "Not really." He raised an eyebrow. "You? Come on." I shook my head. Flings, a few situationships. But nothing that stuck. Nothing that felt like this. He reached across the console and let his hand rest on mine. Just for a moment. Just enough to say I'm trying. Back in the city, the noise hit me like static. Cars, voices, signs, timelines. I could feel the tension return to his shoulders the minute we hit traffic. At a stoplight, he looked at me and said, "Can we not tell anyone yet?" "Of course," I said. "This is yours too." It wasn't shame in his voice. It was protection. Of us. Of something new and still growing. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a quiet kind of intimacy. Not one made of grand gestures or passionate declarations, but one built in quiet moments. He'd swing by my place after work with takeout. I'd show up at his apartment with coffee. We sat on his balcony watching the sun go down over the city skyline, his arms sometimes slipping around me without a word. We were learning how to be men in love who had never learned how to love each other this way. There were setbacks, of course. The first time he pulled away when a neighbor walked by, my chest ached. He saw it. And later that night, he whispered, "It's not that I'm ashamed. I just don't know how not to hide yet." I kissed him softly. "Then don't. Not until you're ready." One night, we went to a quiet bar downtown. Not a gay bar, just a regular bar where no one paid much attention to two middle-aged men nursing bourbon. But when he reached across the table and brushed a crumb from my lip, something in me softened. He was starting to forget who might be watching. We went back to his place that night. No rush. No urgency. We undressed each other with the slow reverence of men who had waited a long time to be touched with intention. Every movement was a choice. Every kiss an answer to a question neither of us had dared ask out loud for years. He lay back against the pillows, pulling me down beside him. His hands cupped my face as he whispered, "I didn't know I could want like this." I smiled against his mouth. "You've always wanted like this. You just didn't have someone who saw it." He made love to me like a man learning his own story for the first time. There was nothing performative about it. Just warmth, skin, breath. He touched my chest like it mattered. Kissed my neck like it had meaning. And when we finally lay tangled in the quiet, I heard something in his voice I hadn't before. Hope. Afterward, we lay facing each other, the city lights spilling across the sheets. "Are we doing this?" he asked, voice thick with sleep and disbelief. I traced a finger down the line of his jaw. "We already are." And in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. 3 months later, Eric kissed me on the sidewalk in broad daylight. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't a movie moment. It was simple. Natural. We were standing outside a bookstore after brunch, waiting for the rain to let up. I was mid-sentence, laughing about some old joke from our cabin days, and he just leaned in and pressed his lips to mine. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. But those 2 seconds felt like the final lock turning on a door we'd been walking toward our whole lives. When we pulled apart, no one screamed. No one gasped. A woman walked by holding a coffee, barely looked up. A guy passed us with earbuds in. And just like that, the world didn't end. Eric stared at me, a little wide-eyed. "I didn't plan to do that." "I know," I said. "That's why it meant something." He exhaled hard and laughed. "Hell, it's just a kiss, Eric." "No," he said quietly. "It's more." That night, we lay on my couch watching an old black and white movie, his head on my shoulder, his feet tucked beneath a blanket. And I realized how many years I had wasted trying to be what I thought men like us were supposed to be: stoic, casual, afraid to feel too much. But now, sitting here with him in that quiet hum of soft breathing and slower hearts, I knew better. Love didn't have to be loud. It just had to be real. And Eric? He was more real than anyone I'd ever known. At one point during the second act of the movie, he turned his face into my neck and said, "Do you remember that night I watched you change?" I smiled. Hard to forget. I didn't mean to stare. I mean, I did, but I wasn't planning on it. I know. I wasn't planning to keep going either. His fingers played with mine beneath the blanket. It's like I'd been trying not to look at you like that for years. And then suddenly I couldn't not look. It was like something cracked open in me. I think it cracked in both of us. He looked at me then, serious, searching. I still don't know where this goes, what this becomes, but I know I want you in my life like this. You have me, I said, no matter what it's called. Over the weeks that followed, we began to build something quietly solid. He came out to his sister over a coffee in her backyard. She cried, not from disappointment, but because she was proud of him. I met his co-workers at a casual gathering, and when one of them asked if we were together, Eric didn't flinch. Yeah, he said. We are. That night, when we got home, he turned to me at the door and asked, was that okay? I pulled him close. It was perfect. We still spent weekends at the cabin, but now we didn't sleep in separate rooms. Now, I'd wake to his arm draped over me, his voice whispering good morning into my shoulder. We made breakfast together. We argued over which wood was best for a fire. We existed fully without the need to hide or explain. One night, sitting by the lake, he said, "Do you think we were always meant to end up here?" I thought for a moment. I think we always could have. But we weren't ready. Not until now. He reached over, took my hand, and kissed the back of it. "I'm ready now," he said. And I believed him. So no, I didn't stop when I caught him watching me change that morning. Because in that split second, I saw everything we had buried under years of habit and fear. And letting him see me fully, without flinching, without shame, was the first step in letting him love me. Not as a friend, but as the man I'd always hoped he'd become brave enough to be. And he did. For me. For us. For the life we're finally choosing together.